Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my November 2023 reading wrap-up. It's been a hot minute since I've been on this channel. I am running a lot later with my videos than I hoped to in December. In fact, I am not completely finished with my November reading that I, have tasked for what I started in November and what I put in my November newsletter. I'm getting too finicky with this stuff, I think. And it's also forcing me to, we're far enough into December now that I'm probably not going to get to everything I tasked for December, and I'll have to be okay with that. Or at least, get to it within December. But anyway, yeah, it's been a kind of a crazy couple of weeks. Part of the reason I haven't been here to finally wrap up my November reading is because of this book. This very long, detailed history of Israel called Israel: A History by Anita Shapira. It's just been taking me a long time to get through. I still have one chapter left. I'm hoping maybe to finish it today or tomorrow. I also have a beta reading deadline that I have to, read and get some of those criticisms back to my group today as well. But yeah, I've been trying to get through this, and then this weekend I got sick. I just last night took the COVID test, so at least it's not COVID. It's probably a pretty minor cold, but I probably also shouldn't be talking for too long. It's also my excuse for, sitting here in my Harry Potter pajamas. But anyway, yeah, so I read this for my Israel book club at my synagogue. We actually met in person, we actually met over Zoom last Thursday. Not a good idea to talk. And I realized when the rabbi sent out the Zoom invite that we actually were meant to discuss this book for 2 sessions because it's so long and detailed. But I'm trying to finish it now because there's just so much to read. I don't know. I mean, this is a very comprehensive book. It's kind of an eagle-eye view of a lot of the different groups and policies and ethnicities that came together, starting, right after Herzl and, the sort of official start of Zionism, all the way until probably the early 21st century. And just all of the groups in play that, mostly from a Jewish perspective, that brought Israel together, although of course Israel was created in large part because of the European powers and how things were settling on the global stage. So yeah, it's just sort of exhaustive. It's one of those things where, I think she brings in a lot of details. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about like economics and so forth that, that's not my strong suit anyway. I'm more interested in the cultural realities of different groups with political and religious opinions, and how in the early stages of Israel, it was predominantly about the Europeans coming in, facing persecution up through the Holocaust, and how they were dealing with the first iterations of Zionism were a lot based on secularism and on a political sort of work socialist realities, and how that shifted throughout the years because of broader global realities and also because of new people who made it in, like when Israel was created. For the next 20 years, most of the Arab states were expelling their Jews, and then the Mizrahim coming in changed the game a fair bit. They had different associations and religious and cultural and so forth, and that's a lot of the stuff that interests me. Also, the conflict interests me and how it moved and changed, the relationship of Israel to the Arab nations, and then ultimately again to the Palestinians, first pre-state stuff and then after 1967. It's so eagle's eye that sometimes I think she does make a couple of broad statements that maybe are a little too simplistic, but overall I think that, I mean, when it comes to, you know, this entire group of people believe this or believe that, I'm like, I don't know about that, or that's how it sounds to me. But overall, I do feel like it's just incredibly detailed, and, you know, she has that distinction of both the left and the right dislike her. So, you know, somebody in my group was joking, well, she's obviously doing something right then, you know, no pun intended. But she's a really, Shapira is a renowned Israeli historian, and yeah, it's been very, I think, informative about trying to understand sort of the cultural, you know, forces that ebb and flow. As a fantasy writer, it just reminds me how incredibly difficult it is to accurately world build, that I guess this is what nonfiction, you know, readers tell us all the time, is that fiction can never actually match the ridiculous complexity of nonfiction and what it takes to build a society and all the different groups that come in and come out and how it ebbs and flows. And so anyway, yeah, this is technically my nonfiction reading for Nonfiction November, you could say, although I read most of it in December, so, you know, I'm a cheater. My other big nonfiction read, I did read all the way through in November. It's Shut Up and Write the Book by Jenna Moreci, but I don't know if it really counts. You know, when it comes to craft books about writing fiction, I don't know, does that count for nonfiction? It kind of feels like, you know, self-help sort of things, which is sort of a different genre, it feels like, than, you know, nonfiction that's like more about history and biography and, you know, things that aren't about you specifically. But yeah, you know, I'm enjoying these sorts of books. Jenna Moreci is a popular author tuber here on this platform, and has self-published some fantasy books that have a good following. And I appreciate her channel for the specificity of some of her advice, and that's what she brought together in this book, which was fun to read, although I feel like in general I'm kind of falling out of love with actually taking craft books seriously. I just feel like, I mean, they're all a little still, like for something like this, even if it only covers the writing aspect, it's still a little generalized. And there's this one website for science fiction and fantasy writers called McCracken, which really gets much more into the weeds and much more specific with examples from pop culture, which most craft books just don't have the bandwidth to do. And even then, I don't know if I have the mind to sort of relate, you know, to this analytical style of thinking, but to actually, you know, use it in my own writing. I still like the craft books, mostly for what they say about the authors themselves and about their own sort of, you know, processes of getting through a book. Like, you know, she did open the door a bit about how she outlines and things like that. It's very novice heavy. It's for, I think mostly it's for people who are really new to the game, but, you know, there's a lot of, you know, new writers who, you know, want to see how this stuff is done. And she also has this raunchy style, which is, you know, helpful for people who like a little bit of personality in the PG-13 way for her with their writing. So yeah, I'm glad I read it. I think I got what I wanted to out of it. The next book still not in the middle of, I only have a few hours left, but it's a reread of To the End of the Land by David Grossman, which is weird to read about during this time. I read it years ago, and now I'm reading it again. This is a story that takes place in Israel in the early 2000s, where a Israeli soldier is called up for reserve duty during like an unnamed, you know, military action after some terrorist incursions in Israel. And the mother is, Aura, is the main character, and she's freaking out about the idea of how he might actually die in this military action. And so she decides to embark on magical thinking, where she takes the boy's father and they go to the Galilee, to the end of the land, as it is called, to hike, rather than, like, she feels like if she's not at home and no one can deliver the death message that she thinks might inevitably be coming, that it won't actually happen. But, you know, it's a very interior novel. It's very predominantly about Aura and her relationships with these two men, the men who are the fathers of her two children, Ilan and Avram, who's the man she's with in the Galilee. And it goes through a lot of their backstory. It's very, sort of almost stream of consciousness, interior, very, very, very literary. I'm actually listening to it on audiobook, and I don't know why it feels a little more disjointed than I remember, sort of the going back and forth parts through history. I mean, and this is usually, I mean, I'm usually fine with this sort of writing so long as the characters are strong, and I've had, affinity for these characters for years now since I first read the book, but it's difficult to read about this sort of Israeli trauma at the moment, the things they went through in their pasts and their present, but there's also a lot of universalism about what it means to be a parent or to desire a relationship. It's weird, I do think for years I've been thinking a lot about how much I appreciate how Grossman personified the parent-child relationship, and I still do. I feel like it's some of the strongest I've read. But rereading it, I realized there's still so much more about the relationships between Ora and Avram and Ilan than I cared to remember. And that's really the heart of this book, is those relationships, and it's interesting to delve back into those and what those mean as I get through this very long, detailed book about, the interiority of human beings. So, if you're I don't know, when it comes to literary fiction, this is I think my bread and butter. It really just, is about, it's the strength of the genre in really making, human characters and their thoughts and histories and desires come to life. And it's, it's been something to get through, but, I love it so much, even if it's taking me a while to get through it. And the other reread I did this month was The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which I got finished just before I went in to see the adaptation movie that came out in November. And yeah, I also loved this book a lot. It's a prequel to the Hunger Games series. It really goes into understanding the ways that the games became the spectacle that they did during the original sequels, or books, I should say. And it also chronicles sort of a bildungsroman for the villain of the original stories, Coriolanus Snow, who is a young man who's 18 years old, called Corio in this book. And it's about his sort of push and pull, like philosophically it's about his push and pull with the ideas of authoritarianism and how he comes and is guided to believe in them so highly, and about his trauma that he also suffered as a young boy during the dark days of the First Civil War. And then it's also a story about his relationship with Lucy Gray, who is a tribute from District 12, whom he mentors, and Lucy Gray offers him a different path to understanding the world, which, spoiler alert, since he's the villain of the authoritarian villain of the original series, he doesn't take. But to me, the book worked really well. The movie, I think, worked a little less well. I still love it. I mean, but there's still a lot to love about it. But I feel like there's some aspects to Corio's philosophical thinking that didn't make it through, and I wish that there was a little more focus on him and his mentors rather than the tributes, because we'd already seen sort of because I feel like the point of the story really was to understand from the capital perspective how they were being groomed and how they were, being led to understand the world through this authoritarian lens. But yeah, there's a lot of, it's a dark story, but, Suzanne Collins has been speaking to me for years about how these realities come to unfold and how people believe in these, how these authoritarian precepts of this brutality, this Hobbesian brutality of, people, need to be controlled, and, there's no lightness to them without, this control of a governing body. So, yeah, it's, and it's just come up in a lot of other thinking, with American politics and with the war in Israel and Gaza about how people lean toward authoritarianism, and groups lean toward authoritarianism to, try to simplify and justify, the horrors that people can face. But Anyway, yeah, I've written about it a lot more than I'm rambling about it now, so I feel like I can link to some of my Nano Blogmo posts below rather than, try to ramble about it and when I should be conserving my voice anyway. The next book I'll talk about is this short story collection, The Souvenir Museum by Elizabeth McCracken, which I enjoyed. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I remember enjoying her other short story collection I have on my shelves somewhere. But it was all right. I do feel like I read it for the page 112 tag, and I do think I really did like that story for how it dealt with grief of losing loved ones or losing your children, and how this character sort of personified it into consuming loaves of challah, and how it got into her own particularism about how much she clung to the idea of her children. But at the moment, I guess I'm not actually remembering a lot of the other ones as well, so I feel like it was okay, but I'm not sure it has much staying power with me. And the next book I read I'll talk about is And After the Fire by Lauren Belfer, which is a historical fiction novel, although it's one of those, I think a lot of them actually go back and forth between the past and the present. In the present, this woman named Suzanne, when her uncle dies, he gives her this cantata that he took out of a home in Germany when he was a GI in World War II. And the cantata was written by Bach. It's a, fake in the real, in reality, but in the world of the book, it's a cantata he wrote, an anti-Semitic canard that he wrote for religious purposes. So in the present-day storyline, Susanna, teams up with Bach experts to try to figure out the provenance and what, how this, cantata came to be in that house and what it all means. And then in the past storyline, of course, we go through how that cantata came to be where it ended up and who had control over it. And it turns out that within the world of the story, some real life characters were involved. Bach's son gave it to a pupil of his who was a Jewish German or Prussian woman and a gifted musician named Sarah Levy. And because he doesn't want to destroy it, but he's worried about, the church getting a hold of it and inciting violence against Jews. So for the next couple of centuries, Sarah's family takes care of it. And Sarah's also related to Felix Mendelssohn and his sister Franny, who were well-known and well-regarded composers, or especially Felix, but Franny's had a bit of a resurgence in modern years. So yeah, we get a lot of history of the musical past and also the historical past of Prussia turned Germany. We go a little bit into the Napoleonic Wars and how that impacted people in Prussia. And so it was really fun to read, and there was just a lot of intriguing historical detail in this. I do think in the present-day storyline, I remember that the archival and research stuff did seem a bit outsized, and I'm someone who actually, I'm a library science student. I went to school to talk, learn about researching, and I did some archives classes and stuff like that, but I feel like for the book it was a little distracting, and that I felt like she did a lot of research, obviously, for this book, Belfer did, but, you're supposed to sort of be quiet about it, I mean, it's an unfortunate thing, I think, about being a fiction writer, is you do all this research, but if you, unveil it all within the story, it often feels cumbersome. You just have to sort of find a more subtle way to talk about it. And I think that's one area where she kind of missed the ball a little bit. But overall, I do think this was a really compelling story. It's kind of my favorite subset of World War II stories about, understanding things through artwork and music, and how, the past impacts the present that way. And I especially did like, going back a couple hundred years to, learn a little more about Bach and the world of his day. And the final thing I'll talk about is my Victober reading, which I did in November, so again, I'm just, belated on everything, running late on everything, but at least I got to it. And for Victober, I read Daniel Deronda by George Eliot and Reuben Sachs by Amy Levy. And I actually did a very long, detailed video where I reviewed both of those books, which I'll link down below. And so I don't need to necessarily talk about them too much here, but I will say that Daniel Deronda is a really sprawling, epic sort of Victorian novel where every subplot gets a lot of space. And even in the two main plots, it's a little confusing because it's named after Daniel Deronda, who is this Englishman who finds himself drawn into this plot, this reality with some Jewish English Victorian people when he saves this one woman named Mira and goes to search for her family for her. And in searching for the family, he gets to know Mordecai, who was a proto-Zionist of his day, one of the earliest sorts of thinkers who started thinking about, we as a race of people, because that's how Victorians understood Jews at the time, we need to, try to find strength in a sort of nationalism to get ourselves out of this wandering state and to find pride and purpose again. And most of the Jews around him are like, you're crazy, what are you talking about? Because at the time that Daniel Deronda was written, really I think some of the most prominent thinkers about a possible pseudo-Zionism that wouldn't have been understood, really nationalism, were Protestants, reacting in various parts of the world to the decline of imperialism and ethnic groups wanting more autonomy. And Jews have never had much autonomy in any place where they've lived, in diaspora at the time. So it's interesting because then I got to my Israel, a history book, and it talked a bit about, the Protestant interest in nationalism, like in the early pre-days of Zionism. So that's one story with Daniel Deronda getting embroiled into that plot. And then the other, which might even be more prominent, is the story of a young woman he's counseling to sort of get out of her own head. This debutante named Gwendolyn, who her family loses all its money when her stepfather dies, and she ends up in a miserable marriage as a way to sort of, keep herself and her family in a good financial situation. But her marriage is to this bullyish, brutish man, and she's miserable in it and has to sort of learn how to survive when she has no other options. And so the push and pull of these two stories seems to be like Gwendolyn looks inward and Deronda looks outward. I guess if you want to put them together, other people actually have kind of seen them as two separate stories in one. But yeah, I mean, I was definitely compelled by all of the stories. The characters just felt really rich and compelling. So I was definitely invested, although it was a very long book. It took a long time to get through. Versus Reuben Sachs, which was a very short book, and I think was mostly reactionary to Daniel Deronda. Amy Levy was a Jewish Victorian woman living in England, basically saying, what the hell is this lady talking about? Like, this, really fringiest of fringe group of Jews who are talking about nationalism is just not where most of us are. So she wrote this reactionary Reuben Sachs, where the characters are, are directly referencing Daniel Deronda and saying, what is wrong? I mean, this is crazy. This isn't who we are. But it does feel like mostly Amy Sachs is criticizing her Jewish community for being too provincial. And Reuben Sachs is the main character who is trying desperately to become like the latest Disraeli sort of figure who can like make it big in British politics, but without having to give up his religion, but it ends up costing him a lot. It's including a marriage of love with the female interest in this story. But overall, I don't think the characters were all that fleshed out and all that compelling to me, and it just mostly was reactionary to Daniel Deronda, which I thought was a much better book when it came to the characters, even if Eliot was describing at the time a fringe community of Jews, or really it was only Mordecai even. Everybody else, the other Jews in Daniel Deronda were still a little like, what are you talking about? And to be fair, I do think both books like dealt a little bit in anti-Semitism and these sort of, what's accepted in Victorian life of like judging an entire group of people, like you were all the same, and sort of the, racializing of Jews, which, existed up through the Holocaust. But overall, yeah, I gotta say, Daniel Deronda spoke to me a lot more than Ruben Sachs, but it was definitely a really interesting exercise to get into, like viewing Jews through this Victorian lens. And anyway, I'll link to the video down below where I yammer about this even more. And that about covers it for me now. I'm sure I've talked more than I should have anyway, but and now I have to debate when is best to go out to get groceries on this very rainy day, and not the best time for a sick person to go out, although right now maybe the rain has stopped for a little bit, so I can do it now. And yeah, I hope to be back in the saddle with this booktubing soon. I hope my next video should be my final wrap-up of NaNoWriMo with my final vlog, my finale vlog, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, I hope you're all staying healthy and enjoying your reading, no matter if you're ahead or behind. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.